I opened my eyes only to find myself lying on top of a beautiful woman who was yelling at me to get off. It hit me that I had been reborn into the year 1980, but everything about my life was completely different. In my previous life, I never married, yet here I was with 3 ex-wives and 3 children. The woman beneath me was Li Shuangyua, my 3rd ex-wife, and we had just divorced the day before. I stood outside in the rain, watching the downpour and trying to make sense of this messy new reality. My mother arrived home soaking wet, carrying heavy baskets of insoles she had been trying to sell. She scolded me for being lazy while the women in the family struggled just to survive. Then my first ex-wife, the tall and elegant Zhao Jingshu, returned home also drenched from the storm. My second ex-wife, Ding Yong, still hadn't returned, and the family began to panic as the rain intensified. I grabbed the rifle and ran out into the heavy rain to find her before something terrible happened. Near town, I saw Ding Yuang stumbling toward me, covered in mud and trembling with fear. I heard footsteps behind us and fired a warning shot into the dark to scare off whoever was chasing her. Back home, the 3 women and my mother stared at me with eyes full of disappointment and coldness. I nodded and promised my mother that I would change and work hard to take care of everyone. Ding Yuang laughed coldly, reminding me that we wouldn't be eating sweet potatoes if I were actually hardworking. I noticed my eldest daughter Chunya was so thin she looked much younger than her 6 years. When I asked if the food was good, she smiled and said it would be better with some meat. The food was awful, and I knew I needed to take immediate action to save my family from hunger. After dinner, I picked up the hunting rifle and began to clean it with intense focus. My mother was shocked because I hadn't gone hunting in a very long time, but she didn't argue. Little Chunya grabbed my hand and cheered when I told her I was going to hunt a wild boar for her. Ding Yuang ran out after me, shouting for me to be careful because the family would fall apart without me. I waved and headed toward Luofeng Mountain, a place known for thick forests and dangerous game. Suddenly, I noticed a faint red light ahead in the forest that seemed to be guiding me. The light moved when I walked and stopped when I stopped, leading me deeper into the woods. After 10 minutes, the light led me straight to a wild boar weighing at least 200 pounds. I raised my gun and aimed carefully, knowing that a wounded boar would be incredibly dangerous. I found my moment and fired, hitting the boar in the head and dropping it dead instantly. The red light appeared again, leading me to a pheasant and then a rabbit in quick succession. It was around midnight when I got home, trying to be quiet as I entered the yard. Li Shuangyua was still awake, and her jaw dropped when she saw the game in my hands. I told her there was a 200-pound boar still on the mountain and that I needed help to bring it down. I ran to find my old friend Chun Da-chuan, a loyal and brave man who would help me without question. Da-chuan came out clapping his hands, thrilled at the prospect of a share of the meat. Da-chuan's father was nervous on the way up, likely thinking I was just making up stories to hide my laziness. But when he saw the huge boar lying on the forest floor, he relaxed and patted my shoulder with newfound respect. We carried the boar down together, sounding a gong to alert the entire village that meat was for sale. People rushed out with lanterns, gathering under the big tree to buy meat at a fair price. Da-chuan proudly told everyone it was him who hunted it, before accidentally revealing embarrassing details about his parents' arguments. Within half an hour, most of the boar was sold, and I took home the pork fat and a whole pig leg for my family. I returned home at dawn, took a shower, and prepared to face my ex-wives with the results of my hard work. The morning sun barely touched the horizon as I stepped into the courtyard, the weight of the wild boar meat heavy on my shoulders. My 3 ex-wives emerged from the kitchen, their faces etched with the familiar look of disappointment they always wore for me. Their eyes widened in unison when I dropped the massive pile of fresh meat onto the wooden table with a heavy thud. Even with the evidence before them, the eldest wife, Suyin, simply scoffed and asked whose trap I had stolen from this time. I ignored the sting of her words and handed her a sharp knife, telling her to prepare a feast for our hungry children. As the smell of roasting pork filled the air, the children ran out, their faces lighting up at the sight of a meal they hadn't seen in months. I didn't stay to eat, knowing that meat alone wouldn't be enough to sustain us through the coming winter. I reached the edge of the Blackwater River and activated my red light vision, watching the murky depths become transparent. Below the surface, I could see the heat signatures of massive schools of carp huddled near the deep trenches. I moved downstream to where the current slowed, preparing the simple bamboo spear I had fashioned earlier. With a lightning-fast strike, I plunged the spear into the water, feeling the powerful vibration of a trapped fish. I hauled up a 5-pound grass carp, its silver scales glistening beautifully in the midday sun. I repeated the process for hours, my red light ability guiding every strike with unnatural precision. By sunset, I had filled 3 large baskets with enough fish to supply the entire village market. I knew that selling this much in the village would attract unwanted attention from the greedy local officials. I decided to take the long route to the city black market, where the prices were higher and the questions were fewer. The city gates were guarded, so I waited for the shift change I remembered from my past life's mistakes. I slipped inside and met with Old Chen, a man who traded in anything that the government hadn't yet taxed. He counted out a stack of crumpled bills that amounted to more than I used to make in a whole year of gambling. With the money tucked safely in my vest, I purchased several rolls of high-quality plastic sheeting and a new set of tools. I returned home in the middle of the night and began repairing the leaking roof that had plagued my family for years. By the time the second day dawned, the roof was sealed and the windows were no longer rattling in the wind. My second wife, Miling, came out to the yard and stared at the new plastic coverings on the windows in disbelief. I handed her a small bag of white flour and some sugar, items that were considered luxury in our village. She didn't say a word, but for the first time, her eyes didn't hold the usual spark of resentment. I knew this was just the beginning, as the house was still a crumbling ruin compared to what I envisioned. I gathered my gear and told them I was heading deep into the mountains for a few days to find real treasure. The third wife, Zhaoli, warned me that the deep forest was haunted by a massive beast that had killed 3 hunters last year. I patted the rifle I had cleaned and told her that the beast should be the one who is afraid. The trek into the mountains was steep, but my body felt rejuvenated and stronger than ever before. I used my red light vision to scan for tracks, noticing the faint thermal signatures of small game hidden in the brush. I spent the night in a small cave, keeping a low fire to avoid attracting any large predators. In the middle of the night, a low growl echoed through the trees, making the hair on my neck stand up. I activated my vision and saw a massive heat signature, far larger than any boar, stalking just beyond the clearing. I stayed perfectly still, knowing that if I missed my shot, there would be no second chance. The creature seemed to sense my presence and retreated into the darkness before I could pull the trigger. The next morning, I followed the trail of the beast and found something even more valuable, a hidden grove of wild ginseng. These roots were worth their weight in gold in the city, enough to build the red brick house I had promised myself. As I harvested the last of the ginseng, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps and breaking branches nearby. I quickly packed my bag, but a group of armed men from a rival village stepped out of the brush, blocking my path. Their leader stepped forward, demanding that I hand over the ginseng and my rifle if I wanted to leave the mountain alive. I felt the red light in my eyes begin to pulse with a new, aggressive intensity that I hadn't felt before. I gripped my rifle tightly, realizing that this redemption journey would require more than just hunting animals. Just as the leader lunged at me, a terrifying roar erupted from the bushes behind them, freezing everyone in place. Something far worse than a rival village was watching us from the shadows, and it sounded very hungry. The heavy breathing of the mountain leopard echoed through the thick brush as I tightened my grip on the cold steel of my rifle. I activated my special red light vision, watching the heat signature of the predator pulse through the leaves. With a single silent pull of the trigger, the threat that had been stalking our village was neutralized forever. I dragged the massive beast back to the village square, where the morning sun began to thaw the frozen ground. The village bullies who had once mocked me now stood frozen in fear, their mouths agape at my haul. I threw the leopard at their feet and told them that the mountain belonged to the one who could actually provide for his people. Knowing the leopard skin would fetch a king's ransom, I headed straight for the hidden city black market. The black market was a labyrinth of secrets where one wrong move could cost a man his entire fortune. I met with the head broker, a man whose eyes were as sharp as the knives he used to butcher meat. We negotiated a price that was 3 times what I had expected, filling my pockets with thick stacks of yuan. But my work wasn't done yet, as I needed more than just cash to build the house of my dreams. I ventured deeper into the northern marshes, searching for the legendary water deer that only appeared during the full moon. The red light in my eyes pierced through the thick fog, revealing the glowing silhouette of the rare creature. I waited for the perfect moment, the water lapping gently against the hull of my boat. The water deer fell with a soft splash, and I knew its rare meat would be the final piece of my financial puzzle. Within days, a truck filled with thousands of high-quality red bricks arrived at my family's doorstep. My ex-wives stood in the yard, their eyes wide as they touched the solid clay that would become their new home. The children ran around the piles of materials, laughing for the first time in years without the weight of hunger. I hired the best masons from the city, paying them in advance to ensure the work was done with the utmost care. For the next month, the sound of hammers and saws became the heartbeat of our lives. My first ex-wife brought me tea every afternoon, her eyes lingering on me with a renewed sense of affection. My second ex-wife began sewing curtains for the windows we hadn't even installed yet, her heart full of dreams. My third ex-wife took charge of the garden, planting seeds that would grow into a feast for the coming seasons. However, a final challenge emerged when a corrupt local official demanded a share of my sudden wealth. I looked him straight in the eye and showed him the official hunting permits I had secured from the city bureau. I also reminded him that I knew exactly where his hidden kickbacks from the village granary were buried. The official scurried away like a frightened rat, knowing he had finally met someone he couldn't intimidate. The day the roof was finished, we held a grand feast for the entire village to celebrate our new beginning. I stood at the head of the table, looking at the vibrant red bricks that shimmered in the setting sun. My mother sat in the place of honor, her eyes tearing up as she realized her son had finally become a man. The house was more than just a building. It was a fortress of redemption and a sanctuary for my loved ones. That night, the 3 women who had once left me sat by the fireplace, talking about a future they finally believed in. I walked outside one last time, looking up at the stars and thanking the heavens for this second chance. The red light in my eyes faded away, no longer a tool for survival, but a quiet reminder of the power I now possessed. I knew that no matter what challenges 1980 brought next, I was ready to face them with my head held high. I went back inside and closed the heavy wooden door, shutting out the cold and embracing the warmth of my home. The children were tucked into their new beds, dreaming of a tomorrow that was no longer a struggle for existence. My journey from a useless husband to a legendary provider was complete, and the village would talk about it for generations. I sat down among my family, finally at peace with my past and excited for our shared future. I had truly been reborn, and this time, I would never let the fire of our happiness go out.